I got to say, fantastic to be up here, looking at all of you guys and hoping to give you a little bit of additional information. Last year when we presented, we were focusing on the impact of different types of email customization options on reply rates. And we got some really interesting findings out of that. For example, if you can contextualize your emails with relevant information, we saw an increase in, on average, 12.7%. And if you were able to reference a past relationship, we saw a boost. And on the other hand, if you were using fake or cursory styles of personalization, we were actually seeing a decrease there. But I felt like there was a broader story, and my big question was, are there groups that consistently outperform, that can go through any campaign with their team and using an established process just get significantly outsized replies relative to the rest of the industry? And it turns out the answer to that question is absolutely. So what you're looking at here is a distribution of average campaign reply rates for our clients. And some of the information is not too surprising. The median is around 12%, which is what I would expect for a kind of standard cold outreach campaign. But when you start looking over here at the upper 10th percentile and upper 5th percentile, you're seeing groups that consistently get in the range of 30, 40, even higher percent reply rates. And this is, again, across all of their campaigns. And correcting the data for such things as, really high results on one campaign or really low results on another. So it's fairly smooth and a good indication of what we were looking at. So that brought me to my next question, which was, how the hell are they getting these reply rates? Now, fortuitously, while I was analyzing this, I was also running user studies for some prospecting improvements that we're working on in our product. And I actually got to talk to a large number of the teams that are in this upper percentile and got them to walk me through their whole process. And there were differences. There's different team makeups. They're working with different types of campaigns in different industries. But I noticed that there were 5 things that really seemed to tie to the increased reply rates that they were getting, agnostic of all of those differences. And so those are what I would like to talk to you guys about today. So the first thing that top performers do that others don't is they look for multiple angles, and more specifically, it's where in their process they're doing that. Most of the teams that we talk to are looking for their outreach angles after they have created their content, and they're doing it often at the point in time when they're sending outreach. Top performers build these different angles directly into the ideation process. So when I was talking to Wayne Barker at Boom Online about his Star Wars Reimagined as Bands campaign, he told me that for this specific idea, they were looking and trying initially to find pop culture style blogs, but they realized that this one was a winner because it would allow them to reach out to Star Wars blogs, music blogs, general kind of geeky blogs. They could also reach out to people who were covering the specific artists that they were parodying. And he also told me something else that was really interesting. When they're reaching out to high-risk verticals, such as fashion, where a lot of it is very, very pay-to-play and it's a little bit cutthroat, they'll actually hedge their outreach risk by targeting lower-risk verticals in their content so that they're able to get the link profile that their clients need. So how do you do this? There is a tactic when you are trying to ideate different topics that Kieran Flanagan, Paul May, and Danny Ashton covered several years ago, and it's still a really good way to brainstorm about and categorize these different types of processes. And so this process is called chunking. So I'll go through this for my ultimate guide to cigar and whiskey pairing, which I actually want to write and read. So the first thing you do is you identify your primary segments. In this case, it's fairly straightforward, cigars and whiskey. And then you're going to go through your chunking process. So first you're going to chunk down, which is looking for more specific examples of your primary segments. Next you'll chunk up, which is looking for the more general supersets of topics so that you can broaden your outreach. And then finally, we'll go an additional step and look for tangentially related topics so that you can even modify your content further or look for different areas in different industries. So you can find these topic ideas in a lot of places. I like to use Google Trends. You just enter in your keyword and then look for the related queries. And then once you have those, you're going to start filtering those and adding them into your different chunking areas. So for cigars, I might want to say cigar accessories is something that a person who covers this topic might focus on. And for whiskey, I'll say Scotch whiskey is a really good indicative type, really good whiskey as well. And then I'm going to chunk up. And I'm looking, again, for those more general categories. So both of these fall under the topic of luxury items. So this is going to give me a bit more reach with my outreach. And then finally, I'm going to chunk to related areas. So we've got cocktails, bartending, and luxury travel. And that last one is really interesting because now you're talking about the type of ideas that can actually significantly change your content. Maybe my guide to cigar and whiskey pairing is now the guide to pairing certain cigars from some regions to certain whiskeys from another. And you can actually reach out to travel bloggers who are covering those specific regions. So these are the types of things that can really, really modify that. And then the final step is to vet these ideas. So in this case, I just did a search for resource pages that cover cigar accessories. You see I found 28,000 results that could potentially be beneficial to me, which I may not have been able to reach out to in as targeted a fashion if I really understand all the different ideas up front. So the next thing that the top performers do is that they target their prospecting. And it's not just the qualification criteria that they're running their prospects through, but it's also who is actually doing it, because that makes a huge difference when you're talking about areas that have a lot of gray area to them, where it's not a certainty. So when I was talking to Vince Nero at Siege Media about promoting his Boosting Your Energy infographic, we discussed that he was looking for sites that had shared similar infographics in the past. And as he took me through his process, I realized that that kind of simplified qualification was total bullshit. He wasn't doing it on purpose. It's just that Vince is so experienced in this area that he knew his niche pretty much by heart. So he was going through, vetting site quality, finding competitor links, looking at ones that had a certain percentage of shares and information. In one case, he found an infographic that I thought was a spot-on fit. But he had a hunch that there was something fishy about it, so he went 8 pages deep on the site, and he found out that that infographic had been shared by the site owner from another of their sites, and he found out eventually that this was just part of a link scheme that could have put his client at risk. And I would have totally missed that, but him being the expert in the area was able to identify it. So when we're talking about prospecting and qualification, we're really talking about looking in 3 different areas: site quality, sharing and linking information, and then information about the contact. And I was very tempted to come up here and say that for all of these areas, you want to have an experienced professional team member looking at this, ideally the person sending the outreach. But that's a little bit disingenuous. And one of the questions earlier, I believe, was talking about ways to kind of speed up this process or how involved in the process. And it turns out that there are ways to do it. There's numerous qualification criteria that you can run through tools or hand off to VAs or just kind of set up a general process. You could essentially just throw into a checklist. And then there's others where you really do need to have that kind of professional eye on the specific site. So when you talk about site quality, there's a lot of areas that you can treat as these checklist items. Advertisements and keyword stuffing, you can look very quickly at the site itself or use a keyword density tool. Looking for promoted posts, those are usually called out as well. And authority, you just run it through your favorite Moz, Ahrefs, whatever your authority measure is. But to understand the value of the content, you really need to have a professional review that, because they're going to be able to answer that critical question of, is this content quality enough? And is it going to work for my specific niche? And what's more, getting the person who actually sends the outreach to review that information is going to let them start building the context that they need for their outreach to really engage with the target that you're reaching out to. Linking and sharing information, again, there's a lot of these items that you can hand off. Percentage shares from third parties, sharing competitor content. BuzzSumo can help you with that. Audience size or audience engagement, you can reference the social networks themselves or run it through a social analysis tool. A couple of things you may be tempted to treat as checklist items are related content and similar types of content. But I'd urge you against that, because viewing the world in black and white in that way is going to mean that you're missing out on some opportunities. if you find somebody who shares an excellent how-to article, then if your criteria was only sharing infographics, then you could potentially miss out on something that would get you a lot of benefit. So you really want to hand those off to somebody who can identify those gray areas in that area. And then finally, information about the contact. I'll say here that all of the top teams that we talk to are willing to invest a lot of time in this area. In fact, they were willing to spend up to 10 times the amount of time that they spent otherwise qualifying the site to find the specific author names and email addresses, because it is almost impossible to build rapport with general site information. And being able to personalize it on that level is really critical for those top-tier reply rates. The good news is that even though it can be time-consuming and tedious and a real pain in the ass, you can hand off the ability to find author name and email addresses. There's a ton of tools that can help with this. You can use Hunter.io, BuzzStream can help with this, BuzzSumo can also help you find authors. But what you absolutely cannot hand off is the ability to review topical interests, because this is where you're going to find those unique angles that let people really engage with the contacts that you're reaching out to. So the next thing that the top performers do is they leverage relationships. And I know that when I said the word relationships, a decent percentage of this audience just cringed. But I'm not talking about the kind of deep relationship building that involves doing an incredible amount of follow-ups on Twitter or blogging, or even going through and doing more advanced things. You don't have to bake them cookies or take them out to dinner. But you do need to cement the relationship when you have one, and then you need to reference it in a way that is valuable when you're sending your next round of outreach. So one of our groups, Page One Power, invests a ton in this. Whenever they get a positive engagement, they categorize it, tag it, they make sure that their database is clean and up to date. And then when any of their teammates are working on a campaign that have had engagements from certain industries, they're able to reach back out and leverage all of those relationships. And obviously that helps with the outreach itself, but it also really, really helps make their campaign successes more predictable, and they grow over time, and that helps with everything from forecasting to reporting. So there's a book, Influence, that was written by Dr. Robert Cialdini, which is absolutely essential reading for anybody doing persuasive work and outreach. But in that book, he covers two different principles that really, really tie to the strength of re-engagement. Those are commitment and consistency. So he says if people commit orally or in writing to an idea or goal, they're more likely to honor that commitment because of establishing that idea or goal as being congruent with their self-image. And self-image is a wildly powerful psychological technique. The trick is not to abuse it. People are onto the game, so I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. So the first step in leveraging this type of process is so simple that it almost feels absurd to say it, but almost nobody does this. When somebody promotes you, reach back out and thank them for it, ideally in some sort of personalized way. Then, when you are referencing their relationship to use their expertise again, once again, thank them, remind them of that past promotion, and then this is an area where a lot of teams get it wrong. They will rely solely on the strength of that relationship. You still have to pitch them and let them know the value that's in it for them. So this is where you're avoiding that concept of kind of gamesmanship and making these contacts feel used. The good news is, again, that you can do this even if it's not your relationship. If one of your teammates has a relationship and you've properly cataloged it, you can use that as a springboard to serve as effectively a built-in introduction. So the next thing I want to talk about is contextualizing emails. And this was the big takeaway last year, and it is absolutely essential. All of the top performers do this. But the idea is not just to contextualize and customize your emails based on the content itself, but also on the type of target that you're reaching out to. So when Fractal is putting together their campaigns, they're not only finding people that are relevant for their content, they're also categorizing their influencers by type. And so that way, when they're reaching out to a journalist versus a corporate blogger, the emails are going to be dramatically different. And that's because every single type of outreach audience that you're reaching out to is going to have different values and interest drivers. So when we talk about contextualization, we're really talking about doing it in three different areas. Personalization, which is answering the question, why them? Why are you reaching out to them versus every other site or publication on the web? It's positioned, which is why is your asset relevant to their specific publication? And then it's persuasive, which is answering the question, why you, or what is in it for them? But then once you get into different outreach audiences, the way you answer those questions, the way you structure your emails should change dramatically. So if you're reaching out to personal bloggers, then aside from being really quiet about it if you go to dinner with Lisa, you want to you want to appeal to their passion. You want to make sure that they are aware that you are not just reaching out to them because you want the link, but because you are in some way invested in the space. So you want to demonstrate your shared interests, highlight knowledge of their work, and if you can, call out connections to other thought leaders so that they know that you're aware of their community and their space and that you are a player in their field. Versus if you're reaching out to journalists, this has been covered fairly in depth today, but journalists are more busy than they ever have been, most likely in the history of media. They are writing content, promoting it, managing it on social, and if you can't get to the story quickly, they're likely to ignore you. Similarly, you want to provide information in that initial outreach that is immediately usable. So that can be various pieces of information from a study that you put together. It can be, just the highlights from a how-to piece, whatever. But you want to make sure that it's something that they could plug and play immediately, because often that's all that they're going to have time to vet. And then finally, if you can and where it makes sense, offering exclusives can work. And the reason is, not only is it going to give you kind of a more targeted approach and targeted venue, again, if you're looking for specific publications, but you want to have something that kind of stands out from the crowd when a large number of people are reaching out to journalists and they're getting hammered day after day. So let's see how this would look if I was promoting the same piece of content, a flavor profile study, to two different outreach audiences, the personal bloggers and the journalists. So if I'm reaching out to David, who is a whiskey reviewer, then I'm going to immediately call out the fact that I know his content. I'm talking about a specific review that he's put together. Next, I'm going to tie my personal relationship to that content directly into the email. So in this case, I've got a shared interest in this specific type of scotch. And then finally, I'm going to call out my relationship with other people. So my highlight got a little off. It's supposed to be down here. But regardless, the idea is that you want to show that you know influencers in the space and that they are going to be capable of working with you. Now, when you talk about journalists, you got to get right to the point. In this case, I've got my survey called out right here, and then I am looking at the specific information that I think is going to be interesting to them relative to their beat. And this is immediate takeaways that they can use. And then finally, got a little bit of a cutoff here, we want to make sure that you are, in the cases that it makes sense, sweetening the deal. That's offering exclusives or something else that's really going to highlight why you are directly relevant to the journalist. The fifth thing that top performers do is they maintain flexibility. One of the commonalities in just about everything you read about outreach is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach. And that's very true, and it's true even in your overall process. So when John Cooper at Point Blank SEO structures his outreach, he is very, very strict about a large amount of the work that goes into it. He has very strict qualification criteria, reporting, the way that people manage their client relationships. However, when it comes to researching and gathering information about his prospects, he gives his team a ton of flexibility by allowing them to send their outreach from wherever it makes sense on the web, and also making sure that they can go to every single venue possible to get that angle. Now, he is reaching out often to sites that traditional link builders and SEOs hammer day after day with scripted emails. And so being able to go at it with this process really gives him a leg up. But again, the idea is to be constrained in where you are flexible in your process. You want to make sure that you are building utility, but not just introducing chaos. So when we think about this, we think about it in terms of kind of a 6-step process here. There's discovery, which is finding your prospects, qualification, which is vetting them, research, which is where you're kind of gathering your context, outreach is outreach, following up is managing your replies or lack thereof, and then reporting is communicating your results. So it pays to have a strict process in these areas. You want to make sure that your qualification criteria are stringent enough to provide value for whatever your goal or your client's goal is. Similarly, in your follow-ups, you want to have a really clear path to that goal. And so you want to make sure that people are following up in a way that is tied to whatever you're trying to get out of your outreach. You also want to make sure in the case of things like automated follow-ups that your team you don't have somebody who's overzealous and just hammering them with 5 or 6 follow-ups and bugging the hell out of them. And then for reporting, I think it makes sense that if everybody was reporting in the way that they most wanted to, it would be absolute chaos. However, you want to maintain flexibility in these areas. Discovery, because there's a whole world of prospects out there that can provide value for your content or for your promotion. And if you attempt to limit that and put it in too tight of a box, you're going to find yourself hitting the most common ones and the ones that are getting slammed by your industry, and you're really going to miss out on some of those tangential niches. Similarly, for research, there's a whole world of areas that you can use to find that unique angle that's going to really resonate with your outreach target. So you don't want to be too strict in that area. And then the last one is outreach itself, which is a little bit surprising. But what we found is that when teams are able to send outreach in a way that feels most natural for them, it's going to come across as more organic and genuine. So if they want to send their outreach as they are prospecting, then that works great. Obviously, it works really well for Cooper. If they want to send their outreach from Gmail, then and that makes it feel like it's more of a personal email, fantastic. If they want to send it from an outreach tool, also really great. The idea is that you want to make sure that they are doing it in a way that they're comfortable with. So overall, with this idea, and really with everything related to outreach, the idea is that you need to make sure that you know where to adhere to the rules and where to bend or even sometimes break them. That's it. Thanks, guys. This was really fantastic. If you want to reach out and talk about any more of this, please, all my information's up here, but enjoy the rest of the show.